Part 3, Chapter 4 of To Let. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Leanne Howlett. The Forsyte Saga 3, To Let, by John Galsworthy. Part 3, Chapter 4, Soames Cogitates. The announcement in the Times of his cousin Jolyon's death affected Soames quite simply. So that chap was gone. There had never been a time in their two lives when love had not been lost between them. That quick-blooded sentiment, hatred, had run its course long since in Soames's heart, and he had refused to allow any recrudescence, but he considered this early decease a piece of poetic justice. For 20 years the fellow had enjoyed the reversion of his wife and house, and he was dead. The obituary notice, which appeared a little later, paid Jolyon, he thought, too much attention. It spoke of that diligent and agreeable painter whose work we have come to look on as typical of the best late Victorian watercolour art. Soames, who had almost mechanically preferred Mull, Morpin, and Caswell Bay, and had always sniffed quite audibly when he came to one of his cousins on the line, turned to the Times with a crackle. He had to go up to town that morning on Forsyte affairs, and was fully conscious of Gradman's glance sidelong over his spectacles. The old clerk had about him an aura of regretful congratulation. He smelled, as it were, of old days. One could almost hear him thinking, "Mr. Jolyon, yes, just my age and gone, dear, dear, I dare say she feels it. She was a nice-looking woman. Flesh is flesh. They've given him a notice in the papers. Fancy!" His atmosphere, in fact, caused Soames to handle certain leases and conversions with exceptional swiftness. "About that settlement on Miss Fleur, Mr. Soames?" "I've thought better of that," answered Soames shortly. "Ah, I'm glad of that. I thought you were a little hasty. The times do change." How this death would affect Fleur had begun to trouble Soames. He was not certain that she knew of it. She seldom looked at the paper, never at the births, marriages, and deaths. He pressed matters on, and made his way to Green Street for lunch. Winifred was almost doleful. Jack Cardigan had broken a splashboard; so far as one could make out, it would not be fit for some time. She could not get used to the idea. "Did Profond ever get off?" he said suddenly. "He got off," replied Winifred, "but where, I don't know." Yes, there it was. Impossible to tell anything. Not that he wanted to know. Letters from Annette were coming from Dieppe, where she and her mother were staying. "You saw that fellow's death, I suppose?" "Yes," said Winifred. "I'm sorry for his children. He was very amiable." Soames uttered a rather queer sound. A suspicion of the old deep truth, that men were judged in this world rather by what they were than by what they did, crept and knocked resentfully at the back doors of his mind. "I know there was a superstition to that effect," he muttered. "One must do him justice now he's dead." "I should like to have done him justice before," said Soames, "but I never had the chance. Have you got a baronetage here?" "Yes, in that bottom row." Soames took out a fat red book and ran over the leaves. Mont, Sir Lawrence, 9th Baronet, created 1620, eldest son of Geoffrey, 8th Baronet, and Lavinia, daughter of Sir Charles Muscombe, Baronet, of Muscombe Hall, Shrops. Married 1890, Emily, daughter of Conway Charwell, Esquire, of Condeford Grange, County Oxon. One son, heir Michael Conway, born 1895, 2 daughters. Residence, Lippinghall Manor, Fulwell, Bucks. Clubs, Snooks. Coffee house, Aeroplane. See Bidicott. "H'm," he said. "Did you ever know a publisher?" "Uncle Timothy." "Alive, I mean." "Monty knew one at his club. He brought him here to dinner once. Monty was always thinking of writing a book, you know, about how to make money on the turf. He tried to interest that man." "Well?" "He put him on to a horse for the 2000. We didn't see him again. He was rather smart, if I remember." "Did it win?" "No, it ran last, I think. You know, Monty really was quite clever in his way." "Was he?" said Soames. "Can you see any connection between a sucking baronet and publishing?" "People do all sorts of things nowadays," replied Winifred. "The great stunt seems not to be idle, so different from our time. To do nothing was the thing then, but I suppose it'll come again." "This young Mont that I'm speaking of is very sweet on Fleur. If it would put an end to that other affair I might encourage it." "Has he got style?" asked Winifred. "He's no beauty. Pleasant enough, with some scattered brains. There's a good deal of land, I believe. He seems genuinely attached, but I don't know." "No," murmured Winifred, "it's very difficult. I've always found it best to do nothing. It is such a bore about Jack. Now we shan't get away till after Bank Holiday. Well, the people are always amusing. I shall go into the park and watch them." "If I were you," said Soames, "I should have a country cottage, and be out of the way of holidays and strikes when you want." "The country bores me," answered Winifred, "and I found the railway strike quite exciting." Winifred had always been noted for sang-froid. Soames took his leave. All the way down to Reading he debated whether he should tell Fleur of that boy's father's death. It did not alter the situation except that he would be independent now, and only have his mother's opposition to encounter. He would come into a lot of money, no doubt, and perhaps the house built for Irene and himself, the house whose architect had wrought his domestic ruin. His daughter, mistress of that house, that would be poetic justice. Soames uttered a little mirthless laugh. He had designed that house to re-establish his failing union, meant it for the seat of his descendants, if he could have induced Irene to give him one. Her son and Fleur. Their children would be, in some sort, offspring of the union between himself and her. The theatricality in that thought was repulsive to his sober sense. And yet, it would be the easiest and wealthiest way out of the impasse, now that Jolyon was gone. The juncture of two Forsyte fortunes had a kind of conservative charm. And she, Irene, would be linked to him once more. Nonsense, absurd! He put the notion from his head. On arriving home he heard the click of billiard balls, and through the window saw young Mont sprawling over the table. Fleur, with her cue akimbo, was watching with a smile. How pretty she looked! No wonder that young fellow was out of his mind about her. A title! Land! There was little enough in land these days, perhaps less in a title. The old Forsytes had always had a kind of contempt for titles, rather remote and artificial things, not worth the money they cost, and having to do with the Court. They had all had that feeling in differing measure, Soames remembered. Swithin, indeed, in his most expansive days, had once attended a levee. He had come away saying he shouldn't go again, all that small fry. It was suspected that he had looked too big in knee breeches. Soames remembered how his own mother had wished to be presented because of the fashionable nature of the performance, and how his father had put his foot down with unwonted decision. What did she want with that peacocking, wasting time and money? There was nothing in it. The instinct which had made and kept the English Commons the chief power in the State, a feeling that their own world was good enough and a little better than any other because it was their world, had kept the old Forsytes singularly free of flummery, as Nicholas had been wont to call it when he had the gout. Soames's generation, more self-conscious and ironical, had been saved by a sense of Swithin and knee breeches, while the third and the fourth generation, as it seemed to him, laughed at everything. However, there was no harm in the young fellow's being heir to a title and estate, a thing one couldn't help. He entered quietly, as Mont missed his shot. He noted the young man's eyes, fixed on Fleur bending over in her turn, and the adoration in them almost touched him. She paused with the cue poised on the bridge of her slim hand, and shook her crop of short dark chestnut hair. "I shall never do it." "Nothing venture." "All right." The cue struck, the ball rolled. "There." "Bad luck. Never mind." Then they saw him, and Soames said, "I'll mark for you." He sat down on the raised seat beneath the marker, trim and tired, furtively studying those two young faces. When the game was over, Mont came up to him. "I've started in, sir. Rum game business, isn't it? I suppose you saw a lot of human nature as a solicitor." "I did."